The rain came down in silver threads, stitching the small town of Harrows end into a gray quilt of damp roofs and glistening streets. It tapped a restless rhythm on the thrift shop's awning, where Sophie lingered, her boots scuffing the cracked pavement. She was 26, a ghost in her own life, her days blurring into a monochrome loop of sleep and silence since the graphic design firm let her go 6 months prior. Her apartment, a dim box on the edge of town, smelled of stale coffee and unopened mail, its walls bare since she'd packed away her sketches. She'd come here today, not for need, but for motion, something to fill the hollow hum in her chest. Inside, the shop was a cave of forgotten things. Moth-eaten sweaters, chipped teacups, a radio crooning static-laced jazz. The air hung heavy with dust and mildew, tickling her nose as she drifted past shelves, her fingers trailing over objects she had no intention to buy. Then, in the corner, beneath a flickering fluorescent bulb, she saw it. A cracked aquarium, its glass clouded with age, half hidden behind a stack of yellowed paperbacks. Inside, a pale shape floated listlessly, an axolotl, its feathery gills frayed like torn lace, its body a faint pinkish white, almost translucent. Its black eyes, small as pinpricks, met hers with a dull, unblinking stare. Sophie crouched, her breath fogging the glass. She'd seen axolotls before. Strange, salamander-like creatures that never grew up, forever suspended in a watery youth. This one looked abandoned, its tank streaked with grime, a single plastic plant drooping in the murk. A handwritten sign, taped to the lid read, $10, as is. She hesitated, her hands curling into her sleeves. $10 was a dent in her dwindling savings, a frivolous risk for a woman who rationed instant noodles. But something in its stillness tugged at her, a mirror to the quiet surrender she'd felt creeping into her bones. "Poor thing," she murmured, her voice a soft rasp, and used for days. The shopkeeper, a wiry man with a beard like steel wool, glanced over from the counter. "Been here a month," he grunted. "Owner dumped it. Don't know if it's got much fight left." Sophie's throat tightened. She imagined it alone in the dark, waiting for someone who'd never come back. Like her, in a way, waiting for a life that had slipped through her fingers. She paid with crumpled bills, her hands trembling as she hoisted the tank into her arms. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, slicking her dark hair against her cheeks as she trudged home, the aquarium sloshing faintly with each step. Her apartment greeted her with its familiar chill, the radiator clanking feebly in the corner. She set the tank on her kitchen table, a scarred slab of wood that hadn't held more than a cereal bowl in weeks. Water dripped from the crack in the glass, pooling in a small, dark circle. The axolotl. Luna, she decided, after the faint glow of its skin barely moved, its tail twitching once as if testing the weight of its new world. Sophie sat, elbows on the table, chin in her hands, watching it. Her reflection wavered in the glass. Pale, hollow-eyed, a stranger she barely recognized. "What am I doing?" she whispered, half to Luna, half to herself. She didn't know how to care for it, didn't know if she could care for anything anymore. But the thought of letting it fade, of adding one more failure to her tally, pricked at her chest like a splinter. She pulled her laptop from its dusty perch on the couch, the screen's blue light harsh against the gloom, and typed Axolotl Care with hesitant fingers. The internet unfolded a maze of advice: water pH, temperature, diet. She scribbled notes on a napkin, her handwriting shaky but determined. Luna needed clean water, a proper tank, a chance. Maybe she did too. She glanced at the creature, its gills fluttering weakly, and felt a pang. Not pity, but kinship. "We're both a little broken, huh?" she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips, the first in weeks. The rain outside softened to a murmur, and for the first time in months, the silence in her apartment didn't feel so heavy. The apartment smelled of damp earth and antiseptic now, a sharp contrast to the stale musk that had settled into its corners. Sophie knelt on the warped linoleum, her knees aching as she scrubbed the thrift store tank with a sponge, its grime yielding in slow, gritty streaks. The crack in the glass wept a steady drip, and she'd patched it with duct tape, a temporary fix until she could afford better. Luna floated in a shallow mixing bowl beside her, its pale body swaying in the tepid water she'd painstakingly dechlorinated with drops from a bottle she'd rushed to buy at the pet store. The cashier had raised an eyebrow at her wild hair and frantic questions, but she'd left with a small bag of supplies: water conditioner, a cheap filter, frozen brine shrimp. Her savings winced at the expense, but Luna's stillness pressed her forward. She worked late into the night, the radiator's hiss punctuating the quiet. Her laptop glowed on the table, open to forums where hobbyists debated tank cycles and gill health. Luna's frayed gills worried her. Red streaks spidered through the delicate filaments, a sign of stress or infection. Sophie's fingers hovered over the keys, then typed a question into a group chat. New Axolotl. Injured gills. Help? Replies trickled in, kind but firm. Clean water, low stress, patience. She read aloud to Luna in a low, soothing murmur. They say you'll heal if I get this right. The creature's black eyes flicked toward her voice, or so she imagined, and her chest warmed at the thought. By dawn, the tank gleamed, its water clear and cool. Sophie scooped Luna gently in her cupped hands, marveling at the soft, slippery weight of it, the faint pulse beneath its skin. She lowered it into the tank, watching as it sank to the gravel, then twitched its tail in a tentative arc. Home sweet home, she said, her voice cracking with exhaustion and something softer. Relief, maybe. She collapsed onto the couch, her body heavy, but her mind buzzed. For the first time in months, she'd finished something. Days blurred into a rhythm of small tasks. Testing water with a kit that turned vile shades of blue and green. Thawing shrimp in a chipped mug. Watching Luna explore its sparse domain. She'd added a terracotta pot from the thrift store haul, its rim chipped but sturdy, and Luna took to hiding beneath it, its head peeking out like a shy tenant. Sophie found herself smiling at its oddness. The way its mouth curved in a perpetual, gummy grin. The way its limbs paddled with a clumsy grace. She talked to it more, her words spilling out in the empty apartment. You're a weird little thing, aren't you? Or, don't judge my cooking. I'm trying. Luna never answered, but its presence felt like a reply. One evening, restless, she plugged in an old blacklight she'd once used for a glow-in-the-dark project. The room dimmed to a violet haze, and Luna transformed. Its skin shimmered with a faint, eerie luminescence, like a creature from a dream. Sophie's breath caught. She grabbed her sketchbook, dust puffing from its pages, and her pencil flew, tracing the axolotl's alien curves, the glow pooling in its gills. The lines came easily, her hand steady for the first time in months, and when she finished, she stared at the surreal sketch. Luna as a bioluminescent specter in an underwater abyss. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't drawn like this, felt like this, since before the layoffs. She posted the sketch online, a whim born of sleepless energy, tagging it #Axolotl. By morning, her phone pinged with likes, comments, haunting. Love the glow. She blinked at the screen, disbelief prickling her skin. A stranger asked, do you sell prints? Sophie hesitated, her fingers hovering over the reply. Maybe, she typed, then deleted it. Yes, she wrote instead, her heart thudding. She glanced at Luna, its tiny face pressed to the glass, as if watching her work. Your trouble, she said, a laugh bubbling up, soft and rusty. The apartment felt less like a cage now, its shadows gentler, and Sophie wondered if this was what hope tasted like, bittersweet, fragile, but alive. The apartment hummed with a new pulse, a quiet cadence of dripping water and the faint whir the filter Sophie had wrestled into place. Spring had crept into Harrow's End, coaxing pale green buds onto the trees outside her window, their shadows dappling the floorboards in the late afternoon light. She sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug, her laptop balanced on her knees, the screen awash with colors, blues and purples swirling in digital sketches of axolotls drifting through imagined seas. Luna's tank glowed beside her, its water now pristine, the terracotta pot joined by a tangle of silk plants she'd splurged on with her first art commission. The axolotl's gills, once ragged, had begun to mend, their feathery tips curling with a faint blush of health. Sophie's world had tilted, not with a crash but a slow, steady shift. The online response to her art had snowballed. 10 likes became 50, then 100, a niche crowd of oddity lovers drawn to her strange, glowing creatures. She'd set up a shop page, her hands shaking as she uploaded files, price prints at a modest $10 each. Orders trickled in, then surged, each ping of her inbox a jolt to her spine. "Look at you, making me famous," she told Luna, leaning close to the tank. The axolotl bobbed to the surface, its mouth parting as if to nibble the air, and she chuckled, the sound bright against the room's stillness. She talked to Luna constantly now, her voice a lifeline threading through the days. "This one's for a guy in Oregon. Wants you with jellyfish," she'd say, her pencil scratching over paper, or, "Don't tell anyone I ate cereal for dinner again." Luna watched, its black eyes unjudging, and Sophie felt a kinship in its silence, a companion who didn't demand she be more than she was. She'd catch herself staring at it, marveling at how its presence filled the apartment's empty corners, how it tethered her to something beyond herself. One night, emboldened by a forum tip, she joined an aquatic hobbyist group online. The chat buzzed with enthusiasts swapping photos of bettas and guppies, but when she posted Luna, its luminescent glow captured under the blacklight, the replies erupted. "That's an axolotl. Gorgeous. Those gills are healing so well." She typed back, hesitant at first, her words stiff, "Thanks, she's my rescue." But the warmth of their responses thawed her. Someone sent a care guide PDF, another offered tips on breeding brine shrimp. She stayed up late, her screen casting a soft glow over her face, a smile tugging at her lips as she bantered about water parameters and tank decor. Then came the message that stopped her cold. "Hey, I'm local. Run a pet store in town. Love your axolotl. Ever thought of freelancing? We need art for our site." It was from a woman named Claire, her profile picture a blurry snap of her with a parrot on her shoulder. Sophie's stomach twisted. Fear, excitement, the old ache of doubt. She typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, "Maybe. Can we talk?" Claire's answer came fast. "Coffee tomorrow? My treat." Sophie stared at the words, her breath shallow. She glanced at Luna, its tail flicking lazily. "What do you think?" she whispered. The axolotl didn't move, but its stillness felt like permission. The next day, she met Claire at a cafe on Main Street, its windows fogged with steam, the air thick with roasted beans and cinnamon. Claire was wiry, her laugh loud, her hands waving as she praised Luna's resilience. "You've got a gift, art and care," she said, sliding a sketchbook across the table. "Draw for us, whatever you want." Sophie clutched her mug, the warmth seeping into her palms, and nodded, her voice barely audible. "Okay." It was a small yes, but it cracked something open inside her, a sliver of courage she hadn't known she still had. Back home, she sat by Luna's tank, her sketchbook open to a blank page. "We're doing this," she said, her tone firm. The axolotl pressed its face to the glass, and she swore it looked proud. The apartment wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a workshop, a sanctuary, a place where broken things could mend. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the room in gold, Sophie felt the stirrings of a life she might dare to claim. Summer-draped harrows end in a lazy haze, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and sun-warmed asphalt. Sophie's apartment had shed its dim cocoon. Light spilled through the window, catching on the vibrant sketches pinned to the walls. Axolotls with trailing gills, jellyfish pulsing in neon currents, underwater gardens blooming in impossible hues. The table, once a graveyard of cereal bowls, now held a chaos of art supplies. Pencils, brushes, a tablet glowing with half-finished designs. Luna's tank anchored the room, upgraded to a sleek 20-gallon she'd saved for, its water shimmering with the reflection of silk plants and a driftwood arch. The axolotl swam with a quiet confidence now, its gills lush and pink, its body plump from the brine shrimp. Sophie fed it with meticulous care. Her days had found a rhythm, not rigid but alive, like the ebb of a tide. Mornings she drew, her fingers dancing over the tablet as commissions poured in. Logos for Claire's pet store, prints for her online shop, even a mural sketch for a local aquarium club. Afternoons, she tended to Luna, testing water, rearranging the tank's decor with a fussiness that made her laugh at herself. "You're spoiled," she'd mutter, dropping in a shrimp, and Luna would paddle to it, its gummy mouth snapping with a precision that delighted her. Evenings she spent in the hobbyist chat, her words flowing easier now, laced with dry humor. "Luna says your guppy's overrated." The group had become a tether, their voices pulling her out of the shell she'd worn too long. Claire's freelance gig had blossomed into a steady stream of work. Banners, flyers, a website overhaul splashed with Sophie's surreal aquatic art. They'd meet weekly at the cafe, Claire's parrot stories tumbling out between sips of iced coffee, Sophie nodding along, her own voice growing steadier. "You're good at this," Claire said once, tapping a sketch of Luna mid-swim. "Not just the art, the caring." Sophie ducked her head, heat creeping up her neck, but the words sank in, warm and solid. She'd started to believe them. The ripple spread beyond the screen. One humid afternoon, Claire dragged her to a hobbyist meetup at the pet store, a cramped room of folding chairs, fish tanks gurgling in the background. Sophie hovered by the door, her hands stuffed in her pockets, the chatter of strangers buzzing in her ears. But then a bearded man with a goldfish tattoo waved her over, grinning. "You're the Axolotl girl. Show my kid your art. She's obsessed." He thrust his phone at her, a photo of Luna glowing on the screen, and Sophie stammered a thanks, her chest tight with something like pride. Others joined in, asking about Luna's rescue, her care, her glow. She answered haltingly at first, then with a quiet fervor, her hands gesturing as she described the blacklight trick. By the end, she'd swapped numbers with half the room, their laughter lingering in her ears as she walked home. Back in the apartment, she sank onto the couch, her sketchbook open to a doodle of the group, fish tanks and smiling faces, Luna at the center. "You're a celebrity," she told the axolotl, who floated serenely, oblivious to its fame. But it wasn't just Luna. The meetup had cracked her world wider, and she felt the pull of it, a longing she hadn't named in years. Connection, purpose, a place. She'd spent so long shrinking, folding herself into the shadows, but now she stretched, tentative but real. One evening, as thunder rumbled outside, she sat by the tank, rain streaking the window in silver rivers. "We come a long way, huh?" she said, her finger tracing the glass. Luna pressed its face close, its eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, she swore it understood. The storm softened, and she picked up her pencil, sketching not for a client, but for herself. A self-portrait, her reflection in the tank, Luna beside her. The lines were bold, her face softer than she remembered, a quiet strength in her gaze. She pinned it to the wall, a small act of courage, and the room felt fuller, the silence not empty but expectant. The world was calling, and she was almost ready to answer. August settled over Harrow's End like a warm hand, the days long and golden, the nights alive with crickets and the distant hum of lawnmowers. Sophie's apartment brimmed with color now, a sanctuary stitched together by small victories. The walls, once bare, sang with her art, framed prints of axolotls and underwater reveries, their hues catching the sunlight that streamed through the window. The kitchen table doubled as her studio, its surface a mosaic of paint smudges and pencil shavings, a steaming mug of tea nestled among the chaos. Luna's tank gleamed in the corner, a miniature world of rippling water and swaying plants, its occupant gliding with a grace that still stole Sophie's breath. The axolotl's gills fanned out like coral, vibrant and whole, its pale skin shimmering under the soft glow of a new LED light she'd installed. Her life had unfurled, not in a grand sweep, but in the gentle unfolding of petals after a frost. The commissions kept coming, steady enough that she'd quit rationing noodles, bold enough that she'd bought a second-hand easel to stretch her wings beyond the digital. Claire's pet store site glowed with her designs, and the hobbyist group had crowned her their unofficial artist-in-residence, her sketches pinned up at meetups she now attended without coaxing. She'd even started a blog, a quiet corner of the internet where she posted Luna's progress and her own. Photos of the tank, snippets of her days, musings on broken things finding light. The words came haltingly at first, but they grew, a thread connecting her to strangers who left comments like, "You've inspired me to try again," or "Luna's a star." One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting amber streaks across the floorboards, Sophie sat by the tank, her sketchbook open to a finished piece. Luna framed by a halo of bioluminescent swirls, her own hand reaching into the water, their worlds touching. She'd painted it on the easel, the brushstrokes bold and sure, a quiet triumph of color and line. "You're my muse," she said, her voice soft but steady. Luna pressed its face to the glass, its tiny mouth curving in that perpetual grin, and she laughed, a sound that felt like home. The meetup group had planned a summer picnic, and for once, she didn't hesitate. She arrived at the park with a canvas tote slung over her shoulder, Luna's latest portrait tucked inside as a gift for Claire. The air buzzed with chatter and the smoky tang of a grill, kids darting between picnic tables while hobbyists swapped tank tails. Sophie settled on a blanket, her knees drawn up, and let the noise wash over her. Claire plopped down beside her, unwrapping the portrait with a gasp. "You're too good to us," she said, nudging Sophie's shoulder. The bearded man with the goldfish tattoo joined them, his daughter in tow, a gap-toothed girl who shyly handed Sophie a drawing of Luna scrawled in crayon. "She's my favorite," the girl whispered, and Sophie's throat tightened, her smile wobbling as she thanked her. Later, back home, she stood in the apartment's glow, the day's warmth lingering in her chest. Luna swam lazily, its tail flicking in a contented arc, and Sophie leaned close, her breath fogging the glass. "We did it," she murmured, her fingers resting on the tank. The room was alive, her art, her voice, her small, brave steps, and a loneliness that had once cloaked her felt like a distant memory, a shadow burned away by light. She wasn't fixed, not entirely, but she was growing, her roots sinking into a life she'd built with her own hands. Outside, the crickets sang, and the sky deepened to a velvet blue. Sophie picked up her pencil, sketching not for a client or a crowd, but for the quiet joy of it. A silhouette of herself and Luna, side by side, two odd souls who'd found their way. The apartment settled around them, a haven of warmth and possibility, and she knew this was her new normal, a life not perfect, but hers, stitched with hope and lit by a strange, glowing love. And so, Sophie and Luna's story closes, not with a bang, but with the gentle ripple of a life reclaimed. It's a tale of quiet courage, of how the smallest encounters can spark the biggest changes, and I hope it's left you with a bit of that bittersweet warmth I felt weaving it. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe below so you don't miss the next one. There's more beauty and wonder waiting to be told. Thanks for reading, friends. Let's keep finding the light together.